One fine day in 2004, a spokesman for Dow Chemical looked into the cameras of BBC television and announced to 300 million viewers that the company, after 20 years, would take full responsibility for the catastrophic pesticide release in Bhopal, India, which had caused the deaths of 3,800 people and condemned tens of thousands more to a lifetime of suffering. It would cost $12 billion, but it was, said spokesman Jude Finisterra, simply the right thing to do. Within minutes, Dow stock shed more than $2 billion in value. But Jude Finisterra wasn't really a Dow executive. He was a brilliant prankster named Andy Bichlbaum, also known as Jacques Servan, who in another incarnation was a professor at the New School for Design in New York City. He and his partner, Mike Bonanno, are the yes men, and they use pranks, humor, and their lethal imaginations as powerful weapons in the battle against social injustice and environmental degradation. They've produced 2 movies, a book, a great many red faces among the corporate elite, and gales of laughter all over the world. I want to start with defining a couple of terms that may not be familiar to everybody, and one of them is cultural jamming, and the other one is identity correction. Can you tell us, because this is something what they say you're about?
Sure. Culture jamming is shorthand for making funny stories that end up changing the culture. So doing things that change culture, jam it. Comes from radio jamming, you know, getting stuff onto the air that shouldn't be there, or pirating, you know, phone calls or that sort of thing. It's changing culture through media. And what we do is a particular form of it, or what we have done a number of times. We do a number of things, but one thing that we've done is what we've called identity correction. You know, regular, you know, small-time criminals, they do identity theft. They steal the identity of people and they use it to get money. We have often stolen the identities of evildoers, big, powerful evildoers, and use that to get attention for what the evildoers are doing. So we just call it identity correction.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
It's like bringing their identity into line with who they really are as opposed to the mask that they wear.
Exactly. Yeah. Either making them, I mean, we've done it 2 different ways. At times we've simply taken what they really are about and what they do in the world and taken it to its logical conclusion. It's taken it a little bit farther than they would like to take it, to reveal what it's about. We've done that a number of times, basically satirizing them, like Jonathan Swift-Sammont's proposal type thing. The other thing we've done at times is representing them as they should be. So, you know, announcing on behalf of Dow Chemical that they're going to take responsibility for a giant disaster that they are responsible for, or announcing on behalf of the World Trade Organization that they're going to end themselves and rededicate themselves to helping all people benefit from business rather than just business benefit from business, that sort of thing.
Take me back through the Bhopal disaster, because although it was very well known, and not everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'd been working doing identity correction for a few years, mainly representing the World Trade Organization at various venues. And we got fairly well known for that, and there was a movie about us called The Yes Men. And a friend of ours who was working at Greenpeace contacted us and said, hey, I'm working on this issue that could really use a lot more media attention than it's getting. It's the worst industrial disaster in history. A company killed thousands of people in one night, and thousands more have died over the years, and they've still not done anything to clean up the site or adequately compensate the survivors. It's a terrible thing, and it could really use some attention, more attention than it's getting. Every year there's a little bit of press, but it could really use a lot more, because the goal is to force the company responsible to actually compensate the survivors, and thus set a kind of precedent for all corporations, and make it so that you can no longer kill thousands of people and expect to get away with it. So we said, great, yeah, that sounds like a great target. Let's do it. And the company in question was Dow Chemical Corporation, which had just bought Union Carbide which of course was responsible for the 1984 Bhopal catastrophe. A pesticide production plant in Bhopal, India, poorly maintained, inadequately protected, sprang a leak, giant emission of toxic gas that killed about 3,000 people in the city of Bhopal. Poor people living around the plant who had squatted around the plant. They had actually squatted around the plant because they were sort of refugees from the countryside. They'd been farmers, small farmers out in the countryside, and the pesticides that the plant was producing were responsible for their losing their livelihoods as part of the green revolution in the countrysides. As mechanization and pesticides took over, small subsistence farming, and not just subsistence, but also small market farming, lost way to these giant agribusiness concerns, and the people had to go somewhere, so they settled around this plant, which then sprang a leak and killed them. Irony of ironies. So when Dow Chemical Company bought Union Carbide, this kind of ailing company was bought by this very prosperous company. A lot of activists saw this as an opportunity to really get something, to really get something for the survivors and to force them to finally do something about it. Union Carbide had never compensated the survivors for more than $500 apiece, and it was time to actually do something now that Dow owned them, but it was steadfastly refusing to do so. And so we ripped off the website of Dow Chemical Company and sent out a press release one day to thousands of journalists announcing on behalf of Dow that they would not compensate the survivors of Bhopal. They would never do anything about that, never, because the Bhopalis would never be shareholders of Dow. So why should they? It was a little too true, and it got very little press. There was one article about it in the New York Times and a couple other little mentions, but that was enough to get it into search engines, so that if you would search on Dow Chemical on the web, you would sometimes stumble on our fake site instead of the real site. And that's what happened 2 years later on the 20th anniversary of the Bhopal catastrophe, when the BBC researcher searching on Dow Chemical stumbled on our site instead of the real one, wrote us an email saying, would Dow speak about the disaster and the demands of these activists, that you do something about it. And we said, we'll be absolutely delighted to do that, yes. And spoke to them a couple of times over the week, never telling them what we would say, but hinting that it might be very positive. And they were extremely excited about that, of course. And then on the day, the December 4th, 2004, we announced on the BBC in front of 350 million people that Dow was going to finally completely take responsibility for the disaster, compensate the survivors, clean up the site, release the chemical composition of the gas that had escaped, and so on and so forth. Everything that the activists were demanding. And of course, the BBC was thrilled, everyone was thrilled for about an hour. During that hour, the market was not thrilled, and the stock value of Dow lost about $2 or $3 billion during that period. And then as soon as it was revealed to be a hoax, the stock value went right back up. So that was a bit of a lesson for us.
Yeah, what do you make of that? The company's being punished for doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's what's happening. And we wonder why companies do the wrong thing, why they don't do the right thing. It's not because they're evil-hearted, though sometimes perhaps they are. But usually they're not. They're just like you and me. They're, surviving one way or the other. And it's not really the decision of the people at the companies to do bad things. It's the system that impels them to that. And that's really the main lesson of our last film, The Yes Men Fix the World, was really drumming that home. Like, the problem is not bad people at corporations. And the way forward is not to appeal to the kindness of their hearts, which a lot of activism really focuses on, is kind of shaming these evildoers and trying to get them to do good instead of evil. Even though we call them evildoers, we know they're not. The real evil is the system, the entire system, and the ideas behind the system. That can be said to be evil. The actors are just actors.
So now, how do you address that? Because that's a lot tougher than just going after a few bad actors.
Yeah, well, you do it but bit by bit, and you know, there's no. I mean, we've ended up doing our thing over the years, kind of by accident. We've stumbled into using humor to get media attention for important subjects, sort of collaborating with mainstream journalists that might want to cover important issues but just need a humorous hook to do so. That's what we've done, and you know, we know that that's not going to fix the system by itself. That's not going to fix anything by itself. But in cahoots with thousands and thousands of other activists doing their own thing and getting the issue out there and working to change laws and working to change politics and so on, change does happen. And there are steps back when things get worse and worse, and there are steps forward when things get better. Overall, fortunately, it seems like things do move forward rather than back. You know, if you look at 150 years ago, what we had, you know, you wouldn't wish on your worst enemies. Since then, you have equal rights for men and women, for people of different races. Sexual orientations are actually acknowledged as existing. You know, you have an 8-hour workday instead of 16. You have no child labor. There's, like, it's endless. And you have environmental regulations. You know, even 50 years ago, things are much better. So I think you just have to look at that.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, your your role is to create change in the social environment, right? And to sustain change in this, and to bring sharp attention to some specific things that you're actually in a position to do that with.
Yeah. Yeah. Our immediate goal is to bring sharp attention to certain issues as much as possible. But in the long term, yeah, to change what people talk about, to change or, you know, augment what people are already talking about. So sometimes there will be an issue that people are talking about, like the fact that U.S. corporations pay no taxes often. And we'll just do a little thing that enables some journalists to talk more about that, with the hope that our work, as well as the work of thousands of other activists, gets these messages into the culture so that when the time comes that change can happen, it does, that people are ready to see it happen. And you know, when that time is, who knows? It differs at different times. Like, there are moments when suddenly you can change the law, and if people are ready to do that, ready to exert pressure the way they need to exert it, and ready to imagine the law being different, then it can happen. So yeah, preparing the culture.
Yeah, and this is very closely related to your comment that Obama needs public outrage.
Right.
Tell me about that, like.
Yeah, well, when he was elected in 2008, he was elected thanks to a mass, not movement, but you know, a bunch of people mobilized by his campaign to elect him. And a lot of people mistook that for a movement and thought that that was enough, because that was all that was advertised. I mean, his goal was to get elected. The Democratic Party's goal was to get him elected. And, you know, so change was this thing that they sold him with. You know, you elect this guy, that's change. Great. The problem is they didn't advertise that that's not really nearly enough, that that's only the first step towards change. Because it's a little less catchy, I think, to advertise like, you know, what was his change you can hope for? His slogan?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Was that his?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Well, that was catchy, and yes, we can. It's true. That's true.
Change you can believe in.
Change you can believe in. Yeah. It's less catchy to say like, you know, the bare beginning of the change that you can believe in.
Yes. Yeah.
So you know, they didn't say that.
The end edge of the wedge.
What?
The thin edge of the wedge.
Right, yeah. They didn't go there. So a lot of people mobilized massively to get him elected, and then as soon as he was elected, celebrated in the streets, as they should have, but then didn't keep the pressure up. And, you know, in part because of that, in part because of the way politics works, and in part because he didn't have the guts to stand up to the Democratic Party as well as, you know, the Republican Party and all the forces pushing on him. You know, we have something not much better than what we had before. And our fake New York Times newspaper was intended to get people thinking about this. It came out a week after the election results, after the victory. We assumed he would win, and we prepared this fake New York Times, 100,000 copies, distributed it in Manhattan through the streets. And it basically told the news that could be in 6 months. It was post-dated 6 months into the future. And each of the articles was about something that could happen. And in the article, you read how it happened, which was through public outrage and people taking to the streets and exerting the pressure that Obama needed to actually be someone. And of course, you know, that didn't work. But our whole goal was to get people thinking like, okay, that's only the first step.
Well, a noble goal, and in the film, when we see people responding to the newspaper, it's actually almost heartbreaking because they are so pleased and they are so excited. And you see, I think, a sort of middle-aged black lady saying, yes, you can't hear her, but you can see her saying, yes, as she looks at the newspaper. And so it's really you obviously really did touch on what people were hoping and thinking was going to happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the vision that we had in our heads, you know, yeah, all this great stuff could now happen, and it could, because now we had this basically decent president. And the fact that he hasn't done any of that, well, it's not really that he wasn't decent, it's that he didn't have the support that he needed. And he had a lot of pressure for him to go the other way.
You refer to that as drinking the corporate Kool-Aid?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, drinking the corporate Kool-Aid. I mean, one effect of the election was Occupy Wall Street, a belated effect. You know, like, because people had poured so much energy into this, and because clearly they hadn't gotten what they'd been sold, change, you know, the Occupy Wall Street happened, and people realized, oh, we actually have to occupy this stuff. We have to go and physically take it over and get our message out, and electoral politics isn't going to help us. And that's one reason why it's rejected electoral politics and rejected the whole idea of demands and so on, is because, well, that's what it gets you. You know, you participate in the system and it screws you, so why should we do that? For better or worse. And I think it's done tremendous work to get the issues that should have been gotten into the media in 2008 and into the culture in 2008, it's getting them in now. So we're talking about inequality, and we're talking about class warfare of the rich against the poor, and so on. But there's a delayed reaction.
Yes, but you know, better now than never.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know, it's interesting because you look back on the sort of the beginnings of the Occupy Wall Street movement. It's like a big flare of passion and outrage and hope and so on. And then you look at it now and you say, well, I don't see that anymore. Yeah, but all you have to do is to say the 1%, and everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that issue has really entered the public consciousness, hasn't it?
Absolutely, it's a huge first step.
Yeah.
It's a huge first step, and it's. I mean, I think if you look back at any movement like anti-segregation or abolition or any movement, if you were there at the time, you'd see these vast gaps of nothing happening, and you'd wonder where it went. And then it surfaces in another way and disappears again and surfaces until finally you have victory. So I think there's nothing to worry about the fact that you don't see that much happening right now. We're talking a 10-year movement.
So bubbling away.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to something else that you and Mike did, and that was to suggest him to Christopher for the sort of honor roll of the Yes magazine. Who are the sort of the hopeful figures for the future?
Oh, right.
And he says, essentially, you got to be prepared to do what I did in order to make these real changes. Maybe I can just get you to go back and remind people of what it was that he did do.
Yeah.
And then what he's suffered for it.
Yeah. Well, suffered. Tim, he was part of a group in Salt Lake City that was angry, like a lot of people, a lot of groups and individuals were angry about the destruction of, about a number of things: climate change, the sell-off of federal lands to the oil and gas industry, and there was an auction happening in Salt Lake City of Bureau of Land Management land, beautiful, pristine wilderness, selling it off for oil and gas exploration. And there was an auction, with a gavel auctioneer and all that. And Tim, like many people, went there to protest. And the first thing, when Tim saw this protest, people with signs walking around, he just thought, that's not enough. We've got to stop this thing from happening, and we've got to put I've got to do something, whatever it is. I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I just protest it. I have to actually stop it. So he went in the front door intending to cause a big ruckus and yell and scream, and he would have been dragged off and maybe gotten a bit of media attention. But as he walked in the door, the person at the desk said, "Oh, hello, are you here to bid?" Because he was fairly well dressed, not too well dressed. I think he had a t-shirt on, but a clean one. And he said, "Oh, yes, I am. I am here to bid." And she handed him a paddle. He signed his name, went in, and just freaked out for a few minutes, I think. And then finally, as the auction was starting, he just realized he was just going to bid and raise the prices of the lots. And then after a while, he decided he would start winning lots. And he won 12 lots in a row before the judge finally realized that this kid in a t-shirt couldn't really be a big oil man and at those prices. So he stopped the auction. Federal marshals came over and took Tim away, and they stopped the auction for the day. It didn't resume, and they actually put it on hold, and then Obama took office and canceled the sale. So this guy single-handedly, with this action, saved a lot of Utah land from exploitation, destruction.
But what happened to him?
Yeah. Oh, well, he had a trial and said a lot of incredibly eloquent things that have been very inspirational for a lot of people. And he's now in jail for 2 years. But I've heard through the grapevine that he actually has enjoyed it. I don't think he's enjoyed the solitary confinement that he's gotten recently, but that was short.
So he's out of that, I think.
I think he's out of that. Yeah. It was pretty short. He might have enjoyed that as well, I don't know. But overall, the jail experience has been positive for him. He's gotten a lot of reading done. I don't want to speak for him. Maybe that's not true, but I did hear that. And I think, for some people, it's not, once you do something, it's not that scary. Like, getting arrested is not scary. Like, once you do it, you realize that's so. Okay, maybe it's a bit uncomfortable, maybe you meet some interesting characters that you wouldn't meet ordinarily, or you get to sing songs with your friends for a few hours. The food's not very good, but basically it's not a terrible experience for activists who voluntarily do it.
Trotsky said that prison is the university of the revolution. He said, here we get an opportunity to study uninterrupted with no danger of being arrested. That's really, isn't that good?
I've never heard that. It's a great joke.
Yeah.
You're absolutely safe from being arrested.
Yeah, he was arrested here in Nova Scotia, imprisoned in Amherst on his way back to Russia in 1917, 1918, I guess. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, and that's one of the things he said.
That's hilarious.
But the University of the Revolution, I thought that was a pretty good line.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah.
But you've also said that climate change is the mother of all Bhopals.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me a little bit more about what lies behind that, and then maybe we can tie that into Vivoleum, which I'd also like to cover, if we could.
Yeah, as we were making our last film, The Yes Men Fix the World, we were thinking, it starts essentially starts with the Bhopal catastrophe, and we started thinking, okay, here's this system that punishes companies for doing the right thing, rewards them for doing the wrong thing. It's a crazy system. And on the one hand, you have disasters like Bhopal that result from that, where companies can do this sort of thing and get away with it. What's the worst thing that they can be doing that the market's rewarding them for? And the answer, if you look at, what 99 or more % of the scientists say these days, is the destruction of the planet. They're getting away with the destruction of the planet because of this system that we've got that rewards them for doing whatever makes the most money. So that's what we're looking at with climate change. It's like Bhopal, but it's worldwide. And right now we're already starting to see the effects of that, of course. There are about 150,000 people who die every year from climate change related causes, according to the UN. And that was a number of years ago. I'm sure it's much higher now. You see a lot of extreme weather events, and there's no telling what's going to happen. It could be absolutely fine, and it could be absolutely cataclysmic. We're sailing directly into completely unknown waters. So, one of the things that could happen at the far end of it is the destruction of a lot of our food capacity, food producing capacity, and living capacity, and migrations of all sorts that, populations that have to survive somehow or other and can't anymore in the places that they are. Some parts of the world could become literally uninhabitable. Temperatures too high to actually deal with it, or too extreme weather conditions. And in such a circumstance, you could imagine a lot of death. They're in an extreme situation. You could have billions of people die, like a good chunk of the population, if our system breaks down and we can't feed ourselves using the same intense mechanization process that we have now. Well, you have a lot of death. And companies, of course, what's their attitude towards that? Like a company like Exxon, let's say, you look through their lens at that situation. What do you see? You see, well, okay, that's really bad, very unfortunate. Now, how do we make money from that, and how do we keep our market system going so that we keep making money? And in the case where you have billions of people dying, of course, there you have your alternative fuel source. Maybe you don't have all the energy capacity to drill anymore, but you have a fuel source just throwing itself at your feet, almost literally. And so this is the vision that we presented. We got ourselves invited to an oil conference in Calgary, Alberta, home of the tar sands. Got ourselves invited as Exxon, and talked about how, indeed, we have to recognize that climate change could have some extreme results, but we are going to be ready for it. We've got an experimental program to turn people into fuel so that this won't really be a problem for us. And it's happened before. We used to use whales for fuel. So using mammalian bodies for fuel is not new technology. We can just do it again. We have this complete crazy talk rigged up about this, and then a key moment we pass out candles to the audience made of they're shaped like a person, and announce that we're going to have a little tribute ceremony to somebody who very important at our company, and we show a video of the guy with a giant afro, supposed janitor at Exxon, actually a comedian named Reggie Watts, who says that he is happy to give his body to this experimental program, and he'd like to be turned into candles. So that's why they're holding these candles. It's this experimental human fuel. And
with human hair mixed in so it smells authentic.
Yeah, there's a good bit of human hair collected from New York City barbershops.
And they didn't twig for the longest time.
Well, when they realized they were holding human flesh candles, they twigged.
Then that kind of got their attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I mean, how you get through events of that kind, and people just sit there and nod and smile and say, very interesting and so forth, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
And that time you did get arrested, no?
No, we got detained by the, well, what happened, what happened was the conference organizer, very large man, grabbed us and pulled us off the stage because he couldn't actually get the security guards to do it. They were too confused about the situation, and it just seemed absurd to go up and, you know, pull the keynote speaker off the podium. And so after a lot of trying, and we got completely done with the talk, but we were at the question and answer period, and he just came up and grabbed us, pulled us away, and then the security guards took us down to a holding cell, and we insisted, no, you're making a mistake. This is, we're Exxon, and so on and so forth, and they called the police. They were holding us for about 45 minutes before the police arrived, telling us the whole time that we were going to be in serious trouble. And then the police arrived, and we told them the truth, of course. You avoid lying to the police if you can, if there's no reason to lie to them. And they just laughed. They thought it was pretty funny, and said, okay, would you like some tea? Just sit here for a moment. Went outside, talked to the organizers. 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes. They came back very shamefacedly and said, look, guys, we have to give you tickets. They insisted, you know, we know this is absurd. You weren't trespassing, but we're giving you trespassing tickets. You don't have to pay them. They're going to be thrown out, but here you go. They just felt like socially obliged to do that. And then the next day we were giving a talk to an audience in Edmonton that had been scheduled, and we told that story of what had happened the day before, and a lawyer raised her hand and said, I'm going to defend you, and we're going to make those charges stick. So she really tried to get these trespassing charges to go to court, and made every effort, but the Crown just threw it out. They wouldn't. Yeah, so we've tried to get arrested, and we've tried to go through court, but often failed.
No, I think that's the kind of thing that would prevent a lot of people from trying to do the kind of thing that you guys do.
Yeah, a lot of people think there's a danger.
Yeah, well, and you commented at one point, we enjoy terrifying ourselves, which I suppose
When did I say that?
I think it was in relation to heading up. Now, there's another thing. You always seem to have a video camera around when you're doing this stuff. There's somebody taking footage of it as you go. But on your way to the BBC studio, I think you said, somebody said, are you scared, or don't you get scared when you do these things? And you say, oh yeah, we enjoy terrifying ourselves.
Okay.
That was a great line also. But people are scared about it. And in fact, your experience has been that really nothing much happens. I mean, people get very upset, but you haven't done anything really, wrong. I mean, I suppose you could say that Tim DeChristopher is a counterexample, but you really haven't done anything, except play a joke. Yeah. And people feel pretty foolish prosecuting that.
Yeah. What we've done in the past, I mean, what Tim did is the height of activism. It's the best thing you could possibly do. He actually put his foot in this process and stopped it, and cost the oil and gas industry a significant amount of money by stopping that. Lost opportunity, lost money, lost chance to exploit all this land. It's great, and that's probably the reason that he's in jail. And that's really to be encouraged more than anything else. The kind of stuff that we do is a really light version of that. We've never, we've tried to gum up the works as much as we can, but kind of on a cultural level, go to these conferences and just make fun of them, essentially. We go and impersonate these corporations or whatever to try to get attention for these issues, and screw with the conferences as much as possible as well, because sometimes they're really noxious overall. But it's not, if they came after us and tried to sue us or whatever, they would just get a lot more attention for their issue. for our issue than we're already getting. So.
I think I think I also remembered either you or Mike saying at some point that you don't get pursued in that kind of way because the people that you are mocking are not stupid.
Yeah,
he's probably right, isn't it?
They're not stupid. Yeah, they're smart enough to know that. Yeah, if they go after us, it's pretty bad for them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're regular people. I mean, people at these conferences who hear us talk, they believe they are seeing Exxon or Halliburton or what have you. Just as I would believe that if I had to go to one of these conferences.
But reality gets kind of warped when you start showing them the survival ball, for example, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a point, and yet people still sit there.
Yeah.
And take it all in.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, as well they should. I mean, we have this wonderful capacity to believe things that aren't true. Suspension of disbelief. It's why you can enjoy theater or films. Yeah. But, and the problem isn't really that they don't get that that's not Halliburton, because really that could be Halliburton with a survival ball. It's not that far from what they actually are about. You know, they're about maximizing money in disasters. So, you know, what's the difference between that and protecting CEOs in disasters? It is something they would come up with. Mm-hmm. The problem is when people don't have enough moral compass to recognize that as a truly evil thing, or, you know, there's this pressure of the audience around you to kind of keep you just polite. Everybody's probably, you know, everybody who has a little bit of opposition in themselves to that, it's not really going to come out. You know, it's hard to step up and really do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Why the name the Yes Men, and how did it all start?
Yes Men are people who go along with the boss, no matter what the boss says. So that's why the name.
But that's the diametric opposite.
Yeah,
that's a mockery in itself, isn't it? You know?
Well, you know, we're talking about how we all are yes men. We all play by the rules of this system that we should not play. We should not play by the rules of. So all these people at conferences who listen and nod no matter what you say, that's just like all of us. We participate in one way or another and support this system. Not all of us, but many of us, and
or maybe parts of all of us.
Parts of all of us, yeah. We all kind of support the system, and removing that support in different ways, or getting others to remove their support of the system, is the first step in changing it. Mm. So we've all got to stop being yes men. But also it refers to our means of protest that we accidentally came up with. We came up with the name after we found ourselves for the first time accidentally invited to speak as the World Trade Organization. We had set up a kind of mock website, a satirical website making fun of the WTO, and the WTO actually reacted to our fake site with a press release condemning it, and we took that press release, which nobody noticed. They actually had to email us to tell us, look, we wrote a press release about you. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? We were so ashamed. We took their press release and sent it to thousands of journalists who wrote a little bit about it. There were a few postings about it here and there, and search engines picked up our fake site. So it was actually the WTO that helped us to get into this racket. And the first time that somebody searching for the WTO invited us instead to a conference, we had no idea what to do with that invitation. We kind of sat on it for 2.5 months, and then finally we realized we could just accept and go to this conference and speak as the WTO. And we decided to take what the WTO says and just push it a little bit further than they usually do. So not to say, no, the WTO policies are terrible, but to say, yes, here is what we are doing, and here's what we're about, and here's this wonderful proposal that's fully in line with our principles. And that proposal was to privatize voting, to privatize democracy, and to allow corporations to buy votes directly from citizens instead of go through this campaign finance system that we have in the US. And, you know, finance candidates indirectly. And people just nodded and just applauded and asked us simple questions, and that's when we thought, oh, yeah, that's the other meaning of yes men.
Yes, we see an opportunity.
Yeah.
Great
idea.
You've set up. Tell me about the Yes Lab, and it occurs to me that this is not easy stuff to pass on to other people to do, is it?
It's pretty easy. Yeah, there's a few tricks. It's not that hard to pass it on because, once you learn how to write a press release, learn the basic idea, which is just doing something funny, but sort of that has some layers of complexity so that journalists can write about it and dig their teeth into it and explain the whole story and have fun doing so. That's basically what we do. Mm-hmm. So there's different inflections of that and different ways to do that, use different techniques, but we find that when we explain these things to people, show a range of examples of us, our examples as well as others' examples of having done funny actions to get attention for things, they pick it up pretty quickly and come up with their own ideas. And so for the last year, I've been at NYU in New York, at the Hemispheric Institute, and it's an institute for art and politics in the Americas. And we basically, every Friday, we brainstorm actions and work on actions with a group of students and local activists who kind of help the students do things, and we help the students and the activists figure out what they need to do in order to accomplish actions around their issues.
And do they actually go and do them?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, there have been 2 so far as of right now, and there's another 2 that are in progress and will probably happen within a month or so. So that's 4 in 1 year. Not bad.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised at the things that they bring forward?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the ones that have happened? I presume you
Sure.
don't want to tell me about the ones that have not.
Right. Yeah, the ones. The latest one was in New York. The New York Police Department has a policy called stop and frisk, racial profiling, where they basically in poor neighborhoods they go around and stop a lot of people. 600,000 people a year get stopped this way with no suspicion, no reason for suspicion. They're just walking around. The police go up and say, "I've got to frisk you. I've got to search you," and they search them and then let them go. And that's really illegal. You're not supposed to do that. The NYPD has defended it, saying they have to do this because they find almost 100 guns a year this way. And, what would the guns be used for? I mean, they're not, that means maybe they stop a crime with 600,000 arrests. But what effect does that have on the people who are stopped this way? It's a really nefarious thing. It creates a tremendous amount of distrust and anger, and it's just not the way to do things. So this group of students came up with a project where to kind of calm the activists down, to kind of calm the public down about this, they were offering a special deal where if you can pick up a voucher at McDonald's, and McDonald's has a number of restaurants in these neighborhoods. You pick up your voucher, and every time you're stopped and frisked and released without charge, you simply write down the officer's badge number and the date, and you write down your ethnicity, and after 3 times you get a free Happy Meal at the McDonald's. So that's their near NYPD's way to deal with this problem, is to just offer free Happy Meals to people who are arrested and released. It's incredibly insulting and stupid, and it worked. They did this. They videotaped people going up with their vouchers and getting their free Happy Meals, and a lot of people believed it and traded it around on Facebook and so on. And local TV in New York did a 3-minute piece about it, which got all the information across about the 600,000 stops and all the outrageous information that the activists wanted to get across. So that it really worked. Very clever, funny action that we wouldn't have thought of by ourselves, certainly.
And the Yes Lab is another dimension of the same, another way to try and get and multiply this perception and this technique, right?
Yeah, that was part of the Yes Lab.
Okay.
So yeah. Oh, this Yes Lab, that Yes Lab. Yeah, they're all kind of the same.
Well, there's the Yes Lab on your website. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, which really is kind of like teaching at a distance. Is that fair?
Well, no. Basically, what we do is this sort of thing, where we work with activists, or at NYU we work with students directly. Yeah, it's always in person. We've tried to do, distance kind of. We've tried to give away our secrets on the web and say, this is how you get invited to conferences, this is how you write a press release. But we found it didn't actually take. People want to be told that it's okay, you can do this. Responsible adults do this, you can do it too. A lot of it is what you brought up about fear. People think they'll get in trouble, and they just need somebody to say, no, you won't get in trouble. And we've written that down a number of times, but it's not the same as when you show up in person and explain the whole thing and answer questions.
Andy Bichlbaum of the Yes Men, whose humor and imagination show another way to fight injustice and environmental degradation. For The Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Campbell. See you next time.